Welcome to the Alcohol Tipping Point podcast. I'm your host, Deb Maisner. I'm a registered nurse, health coach, and alcohol-free badass. I have found that there's more than one way to address drinking. If you've ever asked yourself if drinking is taking more than it's giving, or if you've found that you're drinking more than usual, you may have reached your own alcohol tipping point. The Alcohol Tipping Point is a podcast for you to find tips, tools, and thoughts to change your drinking. Whether you're ready to quit forever or a week, this is the place for you. You are not stuck and you can change. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. I want to take a sec to invite you to the next Alcoholiday. It's a monthly dry group where I help people practice not drinking. This is for you if you feel like you're struggling, if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you're broken, you're never going to get it. I want to just support you and arm you with lots of different tools to battle cravings, work on your thinking about drinking, be more kind and compassionate to yourself as you're doing this. You know, drinking is a habit. And it's probably something you've done for years or decades even. So it takes a while to unwind it. And that's why I'm so passionate about focusing on practicing not drinking, working on progress, not perfection. I love the saying, focus on the direction, not perfection. And I think it's important just to have these types of groups, programs that just give you a safe place that has no shame, no judgment. A safe place where you can just learn new tools and just start unwinding the habit so that it gets easier and easier for you to drink less or not at all. I would love to have you join the next Alcoholiday. It starts the first of every month. As a podcast listener, you always get 20% off by using the code LOVE, L-O-V-E. And it is hosted on a private platform. It is a HIPAA-protected platform. It's really important to me as a nurse just to have privacy and a safe place for you. And what you get is daily emails, lessons, accountability. You get lots and lots of tools to battle cravings. You get a really detailed guidebook, journal to help you out during those 30 days, 31 days, whatever the length of the month is. And then you get downloadable audio meditations, just something to go to when you're feeling a craving. We also do weekly group chats, weekly group support calls led by me and another sober coach twice a week. And then there's also a private chat where you can just share with others, support others. And it's just a great place to practice not drinking. The cost is $89. US dollars, that is. So it's less than $3 a day. Plus, use that LOVE code to get your discount. And just a little background on me, I have been a registered nurse for 20 years. I'm a board certified health coach. I'm a smart recovery certified facilitator, an addiction certified mental health professional. I'm a mindfulness instructor. And then you all know I like to call myself an alcohol-free badass. I've been alcohol-free for almost 4.5 years now. So I would love to see you in the next group. You can sign up at alcoholtippingpoint.com/alcoholiday and join there. I also will link it in my show notes. Wherever you are with your drinking journey, just know that I am rooting for you, that you are not broken, and you can change. Thanks so much. Welcome back to Alcohol Tipping Point Podcast. Today, special for Dry July, I have Hilary Sheinbaum. She is a journalist, the founder of GoingDry.co, and the author of The Dry Challenge, How to Lose the Booze for Dry January, Sober October, and any other alcohol-free month. She is also releasing a new workbook this September, and it is called Going Dry, a Workbook, a practical guide to drinking less and living more. So look forward to that. And I'm just excited to welcome Hilary to the show to discuss
how to kick ass at a dry July or whatever dry month you're doing, how to make it suck less and enjoy it, and just all that good stuff. So, welcome, Hillary.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And that was just the best intro ever. So I appreciate that.
Well, I love what you're doing, and I just want to hear a little bit more about you, like how you decided to do these dry months, like what your experience has been, where you're living. Just tell us about you.
Yeah. So I'll try to summarize it as best as possible because it's kind of a long story. But essentially, I, in a former lifetime, was a red carpet reporter. And my work days would start at 5 p.m. when I would check in. I would, do interviews on the red carpet with A-list celebrities, everyone from Pitt to Meryl Streep and most of the Kardashians and tons of Real Housewives, Selena Gomez, you name it. I've probably interviewed them. And from there, I would go to these events and then the after parties where there were top shelf liquor and, very expensive sparkling wines available for consumption. And even if I wasn't drinking every night or on the job, the other parts of my life were very alcohol friendly. So I was in my 20s and dating and living in New York where people don't drive. And also, I was freelance writing for USA Today and Eater and AM New York, which is a local paper. And I was contributing mostly on the topic of food and beverage. And so there were a lot of, wine, beer, spirit tastings that, filled my calendar. So all of these things considered, alcohol was very just present in my work life and in my social life. So, and, networking events, et cetera. So, it's so funny because going into this was in, 2016. I did red carpets for almost 5 years. I'm going into this was in 2016. So going into 2017, the week before, I got dinner with a friend of mine and we were talking about, everything, just catching up about dating and life and work. And he asked me if I had any New Year's resolutions. And I said no, because my perspective is that you can start, something new anytime. You don't have to wait until January 1st. You can do it on a Monday or the next day or in 5 minutes. You can start whatever your goal is. And so he asked me if I had heard of this thing called Dry January, which started in the UK. And I changed the subject. I was uncomfortable because, and I said, like, to myself at least, I was like, there's no way this could ever be for me. Like, I go to parties for my job and I report on, alcoholic beverages. That is my income. So, anyway, lo and behold, a week later, I am at the New Year's party. I have a glass of champagne in one hand and my cell phone in the other, and I'm texting people before the ball drops and wishing them Happy New Year. And so I texted my friend Al and I said Happy New Year, and I initiated this dry January bet. And so the premise was whoever went a month without alcohol would win dinner anywhere in New York City, and it is pretty expensive, at those very like fancy restaurants. And the person who lost the bet would pay for it. And if we both lost, then, we're not going to dinner at all. So I ended up making it all 31 days and my friend lost. And I won a really lovely dinner. And to this day, he has not bet me anything ever again. But during that month, I really learned a lot about the benefits of not drinking and just I felt so much more elevated mood-wise and I slept so much better and my skin was much more clear and it just, as cliche as it sounds, just changed the trajectory of my career and my life, including like my dating life and my social life and and everything. And, in the end, I say that we both won because I ended up dedicating my first book, The Dry Challenge, to Al. So that's really how this all started. I was not intending to write a book about giving up alcohol for any period of time. I was not trying to make a career in this space, which, back then didn't really exist. And it just took 31 days of, a month and a random bet to really make such a major, major change. I'm not sober now, but I drink significantly less. And I've been doing, dry January and many, many other months, alcohol free in between. So we're coming up on dry January number 9 this coming January. So yeah, I know
Nice.
that was a long story.
No, that was so interesting, and I totally wanna geek out on the red carpet thing, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep it focused too. I'm like, "Wow, that is so cool." But I just appreciate your perspective so much. I think that for people I'm such a proponent of helping people drink less or not at all. And I run these monthly alcohol days, I call them. So helping
Mhm.
people have a dry month, having a safe place to practice not drinking and not having to put any label on it or declaration like I'm done forever. Cause that's a
Right.
scary thought too. And so I just think it's good to have these months, these kinds of ways of thinking about drinking differently, and then moving forward to what do you want your relationship with alcohol to be like? Do you want to keep drinking or are you done? And for me, I got to the point where I was like, I'm done. But
Yeah.
I understand like a lot of people aren't there yet, so they need these kinds of months to reevaluate. Awesome. Okay. So what do you think is most helpful about a dry month?
Oh my gosh, where to begin? I think the most significant difference for me was my quantity and my quality of sleep. For years, I thought that, I was a terrible sleeper due to my lifestyle, being very busy, being a freelance writer, having, the natural stresses that everybody has, but on top of it, living in a very congested city and also just running around all day trying to complete assignments and, find work and doing all the hustling that I was doing. And, I realized maybe like a week and a half in that when I wasn't drinking, instead of sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night, which is ridiculous, I was sleeping, 7 to 8. And I just felt obviously more well rested, well, just rested in general. And I think that anybody who has had a terrible night of sleep versus a wonderful one just immediately feels better mood wise. You're not craving sugar or bad foods. There's just such a difference, and when you feel better, like everybody that you interact with is a much different, happier experience too. So I would say sleep was a huge one. I know that some people, will give up alcohol if their goal is to potentially like lose weight or build muscle. And that was not a goal for me. So I actually replaced a lot of my alcoholic beverages with ice cream that first year.
I support that.
Yeah. Now I turn to non-alcoholic beverages more often. But I gotta tell you, like, just every interaction was different, whether it was like going on dates or hanging out with friends or just being mindful about how I was spending my time. I think that, especially like in your 20s, and I should say for me, I would spend a lot of nights, like very late nights, and just the time kind of escapes you when you're drinking. And when you're not drinking, you're just much more aware of your surroundings and really how you're spending your time and with whom.
Yeah, yeah. I think sleep, like you said, like that was number 1 for you. Getting such a quality sleep, you hear people say like, "Wow, it's just so delicious." I never realized how sleep deprived I was till I gave up drinking. And I always say, like, honestly, like 4 hours of alcohol-free sleep is better than 10 hours of alcohol-fueled sleep, right? I mean, it really does mess with your sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and that mindfulness and that time, like it plays with time.
Yeah.
When you give up drinking, whether you're done or it's just a break, like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I have so much more time on my hands. How do I want to spend it? Who do I want to spend it with? What do I want to do? It's just really interesting.
Yeah. It really is. So that was a big lesson to learn in the best way.
Yeah, and you carried that forward with you, which I think is really cool.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
Well, what are like some of your top tips for people? Like this is coming out the very beginning of July, very beginning of the month. Like, what are some tips that you recommend so that you can have a successful dry month?
So I usually start off with a tip that, well, I'll tell you anyway, is um, to do it with a friend. I think that it's important to, have somebody not only who understands like what you're going through and also who can support you and vice versa, but I think that there is strength in numbers, and there are so many activities that you can do with people that don't involve alcohol. So it's great to have somebody that you can plan activities with, especially in July. I mean, it's summertime, so we all want to be outside, and sometimes that's the beach, or that's, going for a walk, or maybe it's water sports if that's available to you. But I think that's a really important one, because there will be a lot of naysayers, and, knowing that you have somebody that you can vent to or just, chat with about the ups and downs is very helpful. The other thing that I was going to say, because it is July, and obviously, July 4th is a pretty big drinking holiday. I will say that if you start on July 1st and you find yourself drinking on the 4th or during that weekend, just because you have, one drink or a few does not mean that all is lost. You can pick it up on the 5th, the 6th, the 7th. You could start your dry month on the 7th. You have to be easy on yourself, because giving up alcohol, number one, is difficult. Alcohol is everywhere, and especially if you are not yet equipped with the tools to, you know, not drink, then you don't want to become overwhelmed and feel like, "Oh, I need to throw in the towel because I messed up." So just bear in mind that, you can always start over, and it's important to be kind to yourself during those times too, because it's not easy. That's the basis. The third thing I would say is to opt for non-alcoholic beverages. So if you are somebody who, wants to have a glass of something in your hand, I would definitely recommend, there's this new elixir called Duomo, D-O apostrophe M-O, and they have like 17 functional beverages within, and three like amazingly delicious flavors, and it's in a can, so it's great. You can just like bring it anywhere on the go. There's a few bars in New York that actually carry it, and some bottle shops too. I would say if you're like going to a party, like bring those options with you. So again, there's, another brand, Free Spirits, that makes non-alcoholic margaritas in a can, and they also have non-alcoholic spirits. So if your friends like to, concoct something, or you want to make the non-alcoholic version of what anybody else is drinking, um, I would absolutely recommend, buying some of those and bringing them with you. And another tip of mine also is this app called Better Without. You can actually, doesn't matter where you live or where you're traveling, you can put in your destination or your location, and you can find bars that serve non-alcoholic beverages. So whether they have a non-alcoholic cocktail menu, or they have, non-alcoholic beers that you can just kind of, or ready to drink, options. I think that is a really useful tool, especially if like you're with people who are also drinking, because then you can get what you want and they can get what they want. And yeah, I feel like those are my most helpful tips. Yeah, I also think it's just important to plan ahead, like whether that is envisioning what your day or night is going to look like if you're going to a party or if you're going out, or if it means to kind of take the reins in your friend group and organize what activity you're doing to ensure that everyone is comfortable and it's an inclusive experience. I think that's important. And yeah, the more you know what you're going into, the better that you can prepare.
Yeah, thank you. So you had your tips were find a friend, do it with a friend, be kind to yourself. If you do drink, just recognize you can keep on going, you can start over, be kind. I love that. have NA beverages, different options for you. Check out that app, Better Without. That's cool. I'd never heard of that
Yeah.
app. And plan ahead.
Yeah.
And what I like about your all of those are really about kind of socializing, which
Yeah.
is interesting. So it's not like you're cutting off socializing or hanging out with your friends. You're still with them, but in a different way and maybe doing different things.
Totally. Because I think, in at least from my perspective, in a vacuum, there were a few days where I may have been like, oh, I don't know if I want to go out. But it was more so like I recognized that I didn't want to be in a position where people were over consuming and I was kind of bored, right? It wasn't necessarily out of the sense of like, oh, I think I'm going to drink, because I was, socializing, I was still having fun, but I was able to pick and choose what I wanted to do. But I do think that for a lot of people, they decide to stay home due to, peer pressure, like, and other elements. But yeah, I'm all about just living your life as you would, just separating, alcohol consumption from it.
Yeah, and then how do you deal with the naysayers or the peer pressure, those kinds of challenges?
At this stage, almost 9 years later, I think that people recognize that I'm not going to drink at a social function. And I also think that, like, it is much more well accepted. Like, people are just more inclusive with their menus. And also, at least in New York, I shouldn't say everywhere. And sometimes not in New York either. But, thankfully, if that's changing. But in the earlier days, I had different responses for different people. When I was on dates, I think that the men that I was seeing would actually become more supportive when I mentioned that I had a bet going and that I needed to essentially beat my friend. And they would say, "Okay, we're going to rally behind you. And we're going to support you so that you can win." Whereas I think sometimes if it was a close friend, even, which is crazy, back then, some people would say, like, "You're going to drink on February 1st. Like, what's the point?" And for me, I would say, like, I just want to see, like, if I do drink on February 1st, then I'll drink with you. Great. Like, we have a date. But other than that, I would just say, like, let me see, like, or if it was past a certain point, I would say, like, my sleep is so much better. I want to continue this, or like, I'm almost done with my challenge. Like, I'm feeling so accomplished. It just kind of would depend. And I think for people who maybe were acquaintances that I would meet at a bar or a party, and, I just even wouldn't bring it up. I would just be sipping my, sparkling water that looks like a vodka soda and just not even engage in the conversation. So different strategies for different people, different, times of the month had different responses, just depending on, where I was in my challenge and how much I wanted to engage in that conversation with that specific person.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's like it's taking any stigma out of it and making it more of like about your health. Or I love that it started on a bet and that kind of kept you going. And I get where people would be like, "Oh yeah, let's help you win this bet." I think there've been some other kind of apps or challenges where you kind of use that kind of betting mindset or you put money towards your goal or things like that. Like with weight loss, I know there's been some other kind of challenges related to that.
Totally. And I think, we talk a lot about the health benefits of giving up alcohol, but there are so many financial benefits too. I think that people can also use that as motivation to pay off loans or to plan, really fun, unique vacation. Whereas instead of spending so many dollars on pricey cocktails, on transportation, on, the munchy foods that you're eating afterwards and the hangover cures the next morning, you can really pool that money and, put it into savings or, invest it or even just save up and like go live your life and, do something fun. So yeah, it's just, there's so many perks.
Yeah, the financial one is a big one, that's for sure. And it's the hidden cost too, like you said. What do you think makes people, like, give up and just be like, "Fuck it," when you were talking
Oh my gosh,
earlier
there
about
are so
deleting?
many reasons. I think one being one, peer pressure. Two, I think a lot of it is habitual. People come home from a long day of work, they want to pop open a bottle of wine, or they go to a happy hour with their friends, and it's just kind of part of their routine. I think another is just stress, like life stresses. And again, it kind of goes back to maybe not the day to day, like habitual, like regimen of every day, like having something at the end of your day or that sort of thing. But I think that alcohol is a really unique substance because it's something that we use to celebrate. It's used to mourn loss or, cope with stress in a lot of cases. And I think that people have just learned that that is their quote unquote solution. And so, if something devastating happens during your dry month, and that could be something, a trigger to turn to booze. And same thing with like, if something really great happens, or we're just we're just so programmed to say like, let's get a bottle of champagne and like, cheers to this. So I think there are a lot of reasons. In my friend's case, when he lost, he was peer pressured by a girl at a bar. He met someone and he was completely sober and she was cute and she was going to leave with her friends. And he said, no, stay. I want to like continue talking to you. And she said, well, I'm not going to drink by myself. So it could be, a number of reasons. I think everyone is different.
Yeah. And then how do you keep the motivation going? How do you get back on track?
Well, I think for me, there were a few things going on that first year. Obviously, the bet was very motivating because I didn't want to drop $1,000 on a dinner as a freelance writer in New York City. Another was just as I started seeing results in real time, after 10 days, recognizing that my sleep was improving so much or my skin was clearing up. And, at that time, I was also writing about beauty and beauty products and using all these different like face creams and serums. And I was like, wow, all I had to do was, stop drinking for 2 weeks. Great. I think, yeah, seeing the results. I think also recognizing that as I was continuing on this journey, that every time I said no, I just felt like better and stronger about it. I think the first few times, it's like talking about yourself in front of a group of people. The first time you might be nervous or you might feel like, wow, this is so outside myself. But after a while, you build that muscle and you realize I can say what I mean and that people will, respect it, especially if you say it with like authority and like you're owning it instead of saying, oh, no, I don't really think I should drink. If you say, like, I'm not drinking right now because I'm doing a dry month, you might get some pushback as I did, but I think certainly people are more inclined to respect your decisions. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just out of curiosity, like with all you know, like about being alcohol free and whatnot, what makes you like go back to drinking?
It's a really interesting question. At this stage in my life, I've gone like 6+ months without a drink. And every now and then I will want to have a little bit of wine. And I've noticed as I have become a self-proclaimed like non-alcoholic beverage connoisseur, I find myself wanting to compare the foolproof version with the zero proof version or the alcohol removed version. And so that's one reason is that I never want to get too far away from making a suggestion to somebody that's me saying like this tastes like X, Y, and Z, and somebody else being like, you absolutely have no idea what you're talking about. So that's partly it. But also, I think that maybe there will be a day where, I never drink again. But as of now, like at the most, I probably will have like a glass of wine or like a half a glass of wine, and that's enough. Like I'm not, I can kind of end it there and go on my merry way. So just depends.
Yeah, I was just generally curious. I mean, I forever was like trying to find the secret pill, the secret magic to moderation. And then for me, like one was never enough. Like I'd rather have none than one.
Yeah.
And so once I could finally get to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm done. But, you know,
Yeah.
I was in my 40s
Yeah.
and you're young, but I did do a lot of dry months starting when I was in college. Well, actually, I guess I had graduated from college by then, but starting really young, I would
Yeah.
do dry months, but then I'd go back to it. But then it just became unmanageable for me
Yeah.
and it just wasn't enough. Like, I'd never wanted one. Yeah, so I was just curious. But I think, I think I needed well, I know I needed those dry months. I needed those day ones. I needed that kind of understanding, the knowledge of what alcohol was doing for me personally, and then learning about it as well, just getting the education about it to where I could finally get to a point where I was done with it
Mhm.
and feel free about it. Not that it wasn't like I can't drink. It's like I don't drink. Like I choose to be alcohol free. And that's a big difference. But I think also going back to your point when you were talking about people doing their dry months and when they're talking to other people, like, I'm not drinking this month, like really owning your decision,
Yeah.
even if you're just taking a break for the month. Or
To
for the holiday, like, "Hey, I've never done a sober July 4th. I'm gonna do it. Imma see what it's like." Yeah, very cool. Okay, and then what would you say you've seen change, like, in society? Like, alcohol's the view of alcohol, and you're kinda in it. You're in the entertainment, the food and beverage industry, like, what have you seen change throughout the years?
So, before I get into that, I just also wanted to add, I think that it's important to note that dry months, dry challenges, and any kind of, sober curious quest is not for people in recovery or seeking recovery or, looking for a program. I think that it's definitely great for people who are looking to lessen their alcohol intake and maybe potentially give it up forever. But I just always want to say that my literature specifically for the dry challenge and going dry is really not, you know, I'm not a medical expert, so I cannot claim to solve any of those predicaments. So, as you were asking though, I think that it has changed like so much. I think, oh my God, when I started doing dry Januaries, there were no like non alcoholic menu items. If I wanted something that was non alcoholic, maybe the menu said like orange juice or like Diet Coke. I would have to go to a bartender, specifically ask them to like make a recipe, sometimes give them a recipe. And I think that the tone was different back then in 2017. I think that people really, it was believed that sobriety was black and white. You either were in recovery or you were, you know, socially drinking and perhaps functioning, right? I think that now people understand that there's a little bit of an in between, that just because you don't drink doesn't mean that you are in recovery or that you're pregnant or whatever else that people have asked me, over the past 9 years. I also think that there's just like a much bigger tolerance for people being respectful of other people's decisions to consume, which I didn't feel the first time, in my dry challenge. But yeah, now there are so many non-alcoholic beverage brands. Gen Z doesn't drink as much as millennials and certainly not as much as Gen X or the generations before them. And I think the tides are shifting. I shouldn't say turning because I think that they already have shifted quite a bit. But I think that, it's really hard to escape these days how binded to health and wellness that people are. And you can't deny the almost like you can't deny the evidence that alcohol is just not good for you. We used to see these magazine articles that said that red wine is good for you, or a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And yeah, I think it's evident that it's not a health product. So it's more and more, I think, that people are looking to be their healthiest selves, and people are really into longevity, and I think it just doesn't fit the bill for them anymore on a personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a good time to be sober curious or to give up drinking altogether. And yeah, it can be a health and wellness conversation. It doesn't have to be because you're broken or you're morally flawed or that you even have a drinking problem,
Oh,
right?
1000%.
Anyone can give up drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, whatever reason or no reason at all. And I think, it's really interesting because I have worked with like a number of restaurants and bars and hotels to make their menus more inclusive for people, regardless of what their drinking status is. And I think it's so important to have that option on the menu in plain sight that you can point to and order and say, I want this. Even though, plenty of bars, plenty of restaurants, plenty of hotels can make those non-alcoholic cocktails. I think just having the permission to ask and know that it's available is so important, because if you walk into an Italian restaurant and they have so many, different pastas and entrees on the menu, and you're really craving an eggplant parm, but it's not there, you're not going to ask for it. It's just, having that visibility. So, yeah, I think, and, dry tripping is like a huge trend now in the travel sector. I was recently in Jackson Hole, and the Four Seasons there actually just added two non-alcoholic wines by Gießen to their menu. And obviously Jackson Hole is a great place to go dry tripping. They have the mountains, and you can hike and climb, and you can go on, safaris and see different wildlife all in their element. And especially if you're getting up, like I got up, I think at like 5 in the morning. No, 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. I don't know. I was up really early to go see these things. Like, you have no business being hungover during those excursions. So yeah, I think it's great. I mean, why, in my mind, why pay for a vacation when you're gonna physically feel miserable, right? You want to feel your best, you want to feel energized, you want to feel relaxed. And I think more and more people are recognizing that and participating in sober vacations.
I love that. I'd never heard dry tripping. I was like, oh, because
Yeah.
yeah, traveling for me was one of my biggest triggers to like go back to drinking. And
Yeah.
now, that I'm having sober vacations, now that I'm dry tripping,
Yeah.
they're
You're gonna use this
so
a lot
much
now.
better, right? They're so much better. And just thinking about like how many vacations I wasted
Yeah.
being wasted, being
Yeah.
hungover, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. You wanna, experience your vacations to the fullest. And flying is just so dehydrating to begin with. So if you're adding alcohol to that combination, like, forget it. Your body is gonna be hurting.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, tell us about goingdry.co. What is that?
So goingdry.co is a non-alcoholic event and menu curation platform. So I have taken it upon myself to throw a number of non-alcoholic events, mostly in New York City, but I've also done them in LA and Charleston, Atlanta, where some of them are private and open to just journalists and influencers to educate them about non-alcoholic options and kind of just share a non-alcoholic beverage, but also an activity. So like we've done stuff with Barry's boot camp and F45 training, if you're familiar, both workout studios. And we've also had, rooftop soirees at a place called Unlisted in the Lower East Side. And we just try to make these events, and by we, I mean me, fun for everyone so that they will, recognize they can socialize and they can, network and make friends and have a great time without booze. So Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then tell us about the books you have, the one you have now, and then the workbook that's coming out.
Yeah. So the Dry Challenge was my first book. It came out in December of 2020. And it is all about how to do a dry month. It's about the benefits that you feel physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and really tips on how to do it and why they work. Um, Going Dry is coming out September 3rd, and it's a workbook. And instead of me telling people this is how it's done, here is my advice, it is instead more about the reader. So they can take notes. There are more than 70 prompts and exercises that are interactive. So people can, carry it around or fill it in once a day or once, a week and really reflect on their experiences as they are going dry.
Awesome. Yay. Well, thank you. Thank you for being part of this movement and helping people, writing those books, having those events, just making it more fun, making dry months suck less, right?
No, but, like, actually making them so much more fun and better. Because
Absolutely.
yeah, I just, like, man, I look back on, before all of this, and I'm like, "How did I have the time and the day and the energy?" And I didn't. Like, I didn't. So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really a focus on not what you're giving up, but what you're gaining.
1,000,000%.
Awesome. Well, it was so nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to that new workbook coming out and any future collabs or any way I can help you or we can help each other because this is a movement and it's
Yeah,
awesome.
definitely. I will definitely be in touch, and yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Alcohol Tipping Point podcast. Please share and review the show so you can help other people too. I want you to know I'm always here for you, so please reach out and talk to me on Instagram at Alcohol Tipping Point and check out my website, alcoholtippingpoint.com, for free resources and help. No matter where you are on your drinking journey, I want to encourage you to just keep practicing, keep going. I promise you are not alone and you are worth it. Every day you practice not drinking is a day you can learn from. I hope you can use these tips we talked about for the rest of your week, and until then, talk to you next time.